What I want to do tonight is just challenge us collectively to think about what if we changed this conversation that people are having right now about the future of work and flip that on its head to think about the future of life. What if we talked about what we want out of our relationships, the role that our work plays in helping us live our best life, the way that our work and life helps us show up in communities, and instead of talking about the future of work, we talk about the future of life. I'm going to share a little bit about Tulsa Remote and all that good stuff, but I want to start off by, is this going in and out? Everything good? Okay. So I want to start off with just a quote that came from one of our Tulsa Remote members that had no idea that I was presenting today or that I was going to be talking about this topic. But what she said, Jasmine, she said that Tulsa gave me the opportunity to slow down and enjoy life. I've been able to find my passions outside of work, connect with the community, and enjoy time with my family. I also bought my first home as a single woman of color under the age of 30. Tulsa has improved my life tenfold. And I'm not here to make a pitch about Tulsa at a Baton Rouge event. I'm not that crazy. But Kenny and I end up in a wrestling match on the stage. But what I do want to pull out here is she's saying nothing about work other than the fact that she's loving life outside of it. She's saying everything that she's learned about her life, about community, and the ways that Tulsa and Tulsa Remote have helped escalate and elevate everything that's happening outside of the workforce. And for me, this is the future of talent. If we as communities can attract individuals that know this and can uncover this, they're going to be coming in droves. So just a little bit about me and Tulsa Remote. So actually, I'm not going to tell you anything about me, but a little bit about Tulsa Remote. So Tulsa Remote, for those that don't know, is an incentive program. We pay people $10,000 to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We give them access to a co-working space for 3 years and numerous community building events that I'll tell you about a little bit later. But at the heart of it is talent attraction and hoping that people stay. We're placing a bet on ourselves. We're placing a bet on the city of Tulsa that if you show up, you're committing 1 year, and we're betting you're going to fall in love and stick around. This program is funded by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, a private philanthropy, and we've also struck up some recent legislation with the state of Oklahoma that helps us to essentially get reimbursed for success. If people stick around in the city or state for more than that year, we can get reimbursed for that $10,000 by the state. So at this point, I probably could guess a couple of the things that you're thinking right now. Okay, first of all, of course, if you throw money at people, there's people that are going to take that offer and move. We don't have a billionaire here in Baton Rouge. You're, using a ton of resources and excess resources. That must be a nice little life that you got there. Awesome job. You're doing great. Doesn't apply to me. Tulsa. I've heard of Tulsa. Seen a lot about the Tulsa Race Massacre over the last 5 years and that dark, deep past that you all have. How are you ever going to attract people, especially those that value diversity, that value equity? How are you going to attract those people to your city? I'm sure there's only one type of person that's showing up. And the truth is, there could be something about each of those things that's resonating with me and that's resonating in the program and how we're showing up every day. But what I want you to do is lean in for the next 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've learned in this little experiment that we've been running over the last 4 years. I'm going to try to invest you in why remote work matters, how that allows us to live out this future of life that we're all thinking about. And then I'm going to give some organizational leaders or things that you could go take to your organizational leaders that would allow you to live out this future of life vision that we all have for each other. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you could take some of the things, regardless of whether everything is applicable here in Baton Rouge, how you could take some of the things that we've done in Tulsa and apply them to attract talented folks in Baton Rouge today. Does that sound good? All right, cool. And if the Tigers score, you just got to start screaming so I know, and then I know I have your full attention. And I think there's a slide on here that'll give them some momentum as well. So we'll just wait for that. You'll know when it's there. Don't worry. You'll know when it's there. All right, so Tulsa Remote. Why did we come up with this idea? In 2018, before COVID-19 was a word, the last pandemic was about 100 years in the rearview mirror. We had this brilliant idea that we had no idea how big it was going to get, but we thought we really needed to diversify our economy. And there's actually a lot of similarities between Tulsa and Baton Rouge that I've learned over the last 24 hours. One is that Tulsa is incredibly reliant on oil and gas, which in the best of times is an incredibly volatile industry, which you guys know. So we decided we need to attract more knowledge workers, which are often, at that time especially, were located on the coasts. We need to attract those people to Tulsa. We need to diversify our city in terms of industry, and often kind of had this chicken or an egg problem where companies were unwilling to relocate to our city because there was a lack of talent, and talent was unwilling to locate to our city because there were not companies, right? So at the time, the majority of remote workers were knowledge workers. So we decided, why don't we incentivize, again, placing a bet on our city, why don't we incentivize knowledge workers, i.e. remote workers, to move to Tulsa, offer the cash, see if they stick around, and we were placing a bet on ourselves. And what I can say is that we had no idea how fast things would grow, but obviously the pandemic changed everything. About a year after we launched the program, there were way more remote workers than when we started. So in that very first year, we brought 70 people. In 2020, that number grew to 380. In 2021, we really saw the biggest impact from all the applications that came in 2020, and we had 939 people move in 2021, and then last year, that number was about 800. So to date, we've had about 2,400 people move to Tulsa through the program. And what I can say with confidence, through work with Brookings Institute and Harvard Business School and the Economic Innovation Group, is that Tulsa Remote is paying dividends in the Tulsa economy. About 90% of the people that have come to Tulsa through the program have stayed beyond that year. We know that about 76% of people that have ever come to the program and finished that one-year commitment are still around today. There's also an estimated near $14 for every dollar that we've spent on the incentive that's been returned to the Tulsa economy, which is ultimately what we wanted. And one of the really cool things that we found in some of this economic research is we have this big group of people, that 2,400 group of people that we've paid to move. Then we have the natural 10%, or at this point, it's 24% of folks that have ever come that have left the city, so that turnover. But then one of the really cool things, and I don't want this to be missed, the people that we paid to move to the city have started telling their friends, have started telling their family, and of course there's some folks that don't have any choice, their kids or spouses or partners or whatever, so they come with them. But then there's some people that they're like, man, you gotta come check out this Tulsa thing, and they end up moving to Tulsa without the incentive. That group of people that comes without the incentive because of somebody that did outweighs the number of people that leave after their commitment 2 to 1. So there's this extra effect of the program that doesn't require incentive, that doesn't require money, that just goes into community and thinking about how you're building a city that attracts talented people. So to tell you a little bit about remote work and the future of work and the future of life, I feel like we've got to set some definitions here. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the future of work and what I mean by that, and dive into some of the characteristics of remote work. So the future of work has been a conversation that's been happening for a long time that's kind of trying to predict what's going to happen with the workforce, what's going to happen with our offices. And in the midst of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about remote work in the midst of that conversation, right? How is this going to change the way we're working? What does this mean for office buildings? And it's really important when I talk about remote work to point out that the remote work that all of us did in March of 2020 is not the remote work that I'm talking about on this stage right now, okay? So the remote work that you did while you were sitting at the breakfast table trying to feed your child while also teaching that child a math lesson and create a PowerPoint presentation for a product that you weren't quite sure would exist in 6 months that you were about to pitch to your board the next night. That's not the remote work that I'm talking about today, okay? The remote work that you did with Tiger King on in the background, that's not the remote work I'm talking about. I can say this because I'm from Oklahoma, okay? This is where the Tigers should turn it around. Keep me posted, okay? This is the slide that should do it for the boys. Okay, all right, we'll see. But this is not the remote work that we're talking about today, okay? We're talking about the way in which this has evolved, and there's a lot that we can learn about the advantages of remote work. But the big thing that I want to point out around this future of work conversation that's happening right now, and you've probably seen it in the headlines even just the last couple of weeks, is it is the wrong point. We are having the wrong conversations about what work looks like. We see CEOs that are blaming a generation for being selfish. We see CEOs that are saying that this remote work experiment is just a mistake and it's over, calling people back into the office, having second thoughts. People telling us that we're living in la la land. And then my favorite is this one, this is like 2 weeks old. Salesforce saying, we'll actually make a $10 donation to charity for every day that you show up into the office. How powerful would it be if that $10 was tied to your goals, right? Or if that $10 was tied to the relationships that you were building with people regardless of where you were sitting. CEOs right now are prioritizing presence over production, and we are having the wrong conversation. So what I want to point out is some of the advantages of remote work, just in case you're not sold. First and foremost, flexibility. There's about 2/3 of folks that say they would prefer to have no time constraints on their schedule as it relates to the work. And I don't know what the other 1/3 of people are thinking, but they actually, I guess, would prefer to have time constraints. To me, flexibility and choice is the name of the game as it relates to remote work. We also can see that reducing our commute time just frees up time for other things in life. We actually see in studies that in 2021 and 2022, we saved about an hour of commute time collectively as a country. Just think about what you could do with another hour a day. You can show up to your kids' soccer practice after school, or you could eat breakfast with your family, maybe read a book or go work out. I mean, things that just add to that quality of life that we all desire. Reducing that commute time, not only that, but it's great for the environment as well. Number 3, equity. We see time and time again studies that show that remote work reduces some of those biases that we see show up in the workplace in the most ugly ways. Proximity bias, somebody sitting next to me getting more because they're sitting next to me, or somebody that looks like me or thinks like me getting more advantages in the workplace. We also see that, especially for those that are disabled, a lot of times behind a screen, you can't tell, right? You can't see some of those physical characteristics that might show up when you're with somebody physically. Number 4, we see an increased job satisfaction. With that flexibility comes more satisfaction, and that leads to higher retention rates, less burnout, and then finally, improved life-work balance. And I was talking with other Justin, which, by the way, I didn't know that having the name Jude or Justin was a prerequisite for this. Here I thought it was like something to do with what I do for my job, but now all these secrets are coming out. But this is something that's really important, life-work balance. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but we see over and over that remote work leads to, because of the flexibility, because of that job satisfaction, it leads to more time for you to figure out what does life-work balance mean for you. So what is the future of life? What am I talking about when I say the future of life? So one thing I just want to point out that I just mentioned there, and you might have caught it, we often say work-life balance, right? It's a little language thing, but words matter. Something that I've been trying to do, and a number of folks within this space are trying to do, is just switch the order of that. Because to me, I constantly kind of think about, like, why do we say work first? Work-life balance, life-work balance, and at the heart of that is the balance piece, just finding how one supports the other. But what I would encourage all of us to do is figure out what matters most to us right now and think about how that actually aligns with our current time. So I want us to do that right now. Just take a second, close your eyes, be quiet. What are the 3 things that matter most to you? Maybe that is work. Work can be a powerful thing in adding purpose to our lives. Maybe that's friends. Maybe that's family. Maybe that's LSU baseball. What is it that matters most to you in life? So now I want you to think about how you're spending your time. Okay, and work is a necessity. I understand that work is something that we have to do. Work often unlocks doors. Work in itself is a privilege. Remote work is a privilege in itself. But think about, how is your time aligning with your priorities? How is your time aligning with what matters most to you? Okay, you can open your eyes. I don't want people to fall asleep. It's almost past my bedtime. So come on back up here. I would say that what matters most to me is my family. Here's my kids. My wife's here too, so I'll probably start crying here in a second. Without a doubt, what matters most to me is my family, right? I would never, ever, ever say that my work is more important to me than my family. Do I do work to support my family? Absolutely. But time and time again, there are times that I prioritize my work over my family. I'm sure many of you can relate with that. I don't know about you, but at times, I feel like regardless of what I prioritize in life, I feel like I'm trying to work those priorities into a system that doesn't quite support the priorities that I want to have, right? There's a set time in the day. There's evening commitments that happen. I got to show up to this thing. I'm being pulled this direction. And oftentimes it feels like this tug of war where we're trying to do one thing with our priorities and the way we're spending our time, but the system that we're trying to do it in feels broken. It feels a little bit out of whack. So if you're an organizational leader or an individual that wants to take some recommendations to your organizational leader about how you can find that life-work balance in the workplace, here's a couple recommendations that I would have, especially as it relates to remote work. And by the way, remote work is not for everybody, okay? I need to state that. There's times where I cannot work at home because there's way too many distracting things going on at home, or I have other priorities at home. I can't focus. There's people that get distracted by Netflix or whatever else. I also recognize that not every job is remote. I don't want every job to be remote. That's not what I'm trying to advocate for. And then, like I said earlier, I also recognize in so many ways that remote work is a privilege. Having the technology, having internet access, man, there's so many things that, like, even just have, like, saying some of these things, it's not something that applies to everybody, but it's something that everybody deserves. It's something that everybody at least needs to have that choice. So I just want to give all those caveats before I start diving in here. So first and foremost, if you're an organizational leader or you want to go back to your organizational leader, have a remote work policy. I know it sounds super easy. It sounds super simple. It sounds super obvious. But what happens if you don't have a policy is you have 10 different policies within your organization that all depend on what your manager's telling you. Okay, so then what happens? People that have been there longer or that get along with their manager get more rights, get more access, get more flexibility, and then it starts to create this inequitable, experience for employees across the organization. So create a remote work policy that's going to ground everybody in the same expectations. Then we want to create a culture of over-documentation and transparency. Okay, so what does this do? It creates the access to information for people at home that's the same for the people in the office. If you're showing up in the office every day and you're hearing conversations and nobody's documenting those conversations, the person at home is now at a disadvantage, right? So what we need to do is create this culture of transparency and over-documentation that's going to make information accessible to everybody, regardless of where they're located. One thing that you should also be wary of in this hybrid environment, which I think is probably more of where we're going to land as a workforce, is some people that work at home, some people that come to the office. Hopefully you have the ability to choose what works best for you. You want to be careful about the hybrid meeting after the meeting. So right now we're on live stream. Let's imagine that this is a Zoom meeting. All of us are having a meeting. Those people are virtual. They're joining our meeting, okay? Meeting ends, they log off. What typically happens is then all of us have another meeting. Who's experienced that? Yeah, so you're in the meeting room. It's like, oh, okay, well, what'd you think about this? Or Sally's on the Zoom. What'd you think about what she said? That's so dangerous. Because what happens in that is whoever was on the Zoom is now missing out on all the after conversation, and they're at a disadvantage. Okay, so then what starts to happen as promotions come around or performance reviews, the people that are going to have access to that information, i.e. the people in the room itself or in the after meeting, are going to have a natural advantage that everybody just needs to be wary of. So some things you can do as an organizational leader, something I try to do, when that starts to happen, just stop it. Hey guys, Sally was on the meeting, she's not here anymore, this doesn't feel great. Let's do this in the next meeting, or let's call her back in. If this feels like a good conversation to have right now, let's call Sally back in. Little things you can take to make sure that Sally, I don't know why I'm calling that camera Sally, is in the know, has the same access to information as everybody in the room. The other thing I would just be wary of is that required not so happy hour, okay? Everybody's probably experienced this at some point. You're required to come to this happy hour and you're gonna love your colleagues, dang it. Yep, one person clapped. One person knows what I'm talking about. Okay, so recommendation here, obviously culture matters. We wanna like each other. You wanna get along with the people at work. All that matters. I'm not saying there's no value to culture or culture building activities. Can we do them during the workday? Are you creating space for folks that don't live or cannot come to that meeting to create culture as well? Just be thoughtful about that and create similar experiences for everybody. And then these last two are the biggest ones. Prioritize production over presence. Prioritize outcomes over hours. At the end of the day, we need to create a culture that's asynchronous. That's really what's going to lead to this life-work balance that we're all talking about. If I can do my work at 9 p.m. after my kids go to bed and produce the same outcomes, think about what that frees up for me from 5 to 9, right? And maybe I'm going to have to make a sacrifice where I know that going to my kid's soccer game or my daughter's swim practice means that I'm going to have to work a little bit later that night. Wouldn't it be lovely to have that choice and have the conversation with my manager be rooted in outcomes as opposed to when I'm actually doing the work? And as a manager, just like you would want from any manager, lead with empathy, understand your people, and know what they care about. And for me, it's having this conversation about what is it that you want out of life, and how is this job, how is this place of employment helping you get there? Those are the types of people that we all want to follow. So how do we use what Tulsa has learned and what Tulsa Remote has learned to attract people to Baton Rouge? I'm going to give you some tips, I'm going to give you some insight, but you have to promise not to steal anybody from Tulsa. Okay, that's the caveat here. So, there we go. First and foremost, living in this talent workforce is greater than working. If you want to attract individuals to the city, you need to focus on the individual, not the business. Yes. Thank you for starting that applause. You need to create Baton Rouge into a city that people want to live, not just want to work. Okay? This cannot be understated. How do you do that? Tulsa has made some really intentional investments in place over the last 20 years. No one would move to Tulsa 20 years ago, even for $10,000. Okay? There have been incredible resources poured into outdoor amenities. We have the Gathering Place, which was just named the best public park in the world. There's an amazing downtown scene. And again, I'm not trying to give you my Tulsa pitch, but it's a cool place to be. And that matters. Our program would not be as big as it is today, as successful as it is today, without the investments in place and building a high quality of life for the people that we're trying to attract. And then as an organization, we can get really specific at the types of people that we are trying to attract. We're trying to diversify our economy. We're trying to diversify our population. We're looking for people that are going to impact the economy in meaningful ways, are going to give back to the community, and are open-minded to at least staying past the year. And those are all things that we look for in our application process as we vetted over 70,000 applications to date. Second, community is bigger than you. And this is something that you can do even if you don't start a program like this. You cannot understate the value of community in today's workforce. The $10,000 was something that got incredible amounts of headlines and still is today. As Kenny mentioned, we were in Vox, we were on Today Explained yesterday. You know, people are interested in hearing this story. But you ask anybody in our program, it's not the $10,000 that's keeping people around, it's community. And so the big question is, how do you create community for people outside of work that ties people to place? One of the ways that we do this and we try to create a system for this is by making our goal integration as opposed to staying within that Tulsa Remote bubble. And an analogy that we use is the time that you went to the store to buy a goldfish, all right? Yeah, I said that right. That's the analogy. So you go to the store, you look at hundreds of fish in an aquarium, you pick out the fish that you want, and what does that store worker do? They put the fish in a little bag for you, right? And then you take that bag home. Anybody know what we do with the bag? You put the fish that's in the bag in the aquarium that you've prepared for that fish, right? But it stays in the bag because you need to let that fish get acclimated to its new environment. And then at some point when it feels ready, I don't know enough about fish to know when it's ready, but when it's ready, you cut the bag open and the fish swims free. And it starts to navigate its new environment, right? Meet friends, play with the toys, whatever fish do. That's exactly how we think about our work with our Tulsa Remote members. We're helping them transition to town in the bag. We're helping them get acclimated to their new environment that we've helped curate for them. But our ultimate goal is that they do not need us in order to love all that Tulsa has to offer. And whether you are attracting individuals to your business, whether you are attracting people to the city to do a remote job, whatever else, the quicker that you can get somebody integrated into the city as a whole, outside of the reason that they came there, the more likely they are to stay. And we try to build this into our systems at Tulsa Remote by having a white glove service upon arrival. We go high touch early. In your first 90 days, we're trying to sit down with you and learn who you are, what you care about, what do you want to get out of your year, and create a little integration plan for you. We're going to connect you to other organizations. We're going to help you get situated on places you can volunteer and boards you can sit on. And then we're going to encourage you to go and do. And then we're going to check back in and say, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? And then our method is, and our theory is, the sooner we can connect you to others, the more likely you are to stick around. Community is bigger than you. Community matters. No matter who the individual is that you're recruiting, the more that you can support them in finding community outside of yourself, outside of themselves, the more successful that you're going to be, and the more likely they are to stick around. And lastly, don't sugarcoat it. Don't sugarcoat it. Tulsa has a very dark past. Don't sugarcoat it. Use it. Use it to talk about the inspiring future. Use it to talk about what you've learned through that process. If you roll out the red carpet for everybody that's coming to Baton Rouge, and their experience in visiting Baton Rouge is just that red carpet treatment, what's going to show up? What's going to happen when they show up and the red carpet's not there anymore? It might be fun for a little bit, but over time it kind of loses its muster, and then people get dissatisfied and they say, whoa, 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 whoa. What happened to that restaurant you took me to? Or why am I not getting free drinks everywhere I go, right? So we tried to be really intentional about giving people a real Tulsa experience, talking about everything that has to do with Tulsa, flaws and all, in your experience. And at the end of that, you might say, this isn't for me. That's okay. That's okay. It's not going to be for everybody. And you shouldn't expect that everybody would want to be here either. But just like a relationship, be yourself, be transparent, be honest, and you're going to attract the people that you want to attract and that are going to be good fits for your city. So I'd love to stay connected, and then I'm going to close this out, and then we do have time for questions, I think. Kenny, we have time for questions? Maybe a couple? Cool. So if you email me here, justinspeaks@tulsaremote.com over the next couple days, 72 hours, I would love to send you our most recent economic impact report that we just launched a couple weeks ago. That's what got the Vox attention and Today Explained. It goes really in depth as to everything we're doing, some community stories, ways that our members are impacting our community. And then I'd also love to get connected on LinkedIn if there's questions I can answer or ways that I can support. All jokes aside, we love these types of conversations. For mid-sized cities especially, there's so many similarities between Baton Rouge and Tulsa, and when you win, we win, and vice versa. So I'm an open book, would love to connect on LinkedIn. And then if you want to get a sense of like how we're marketing our city, for those of you that kind of care about that path or are interested in the things that we're putting out there, feel free to follow us. I think we do some of the best social media to represent what's happening in Tulsa. In closing, before we open up to questions, I'd love to, again, hear from one of our members directly. This guy's named Jason, awesome dude. He says that the vision of being able to provide true economic, cultural, social, and political change to a city was incredibly compelling, which spoke to the pioneer in me. Again, nothing about work. Never before had I heard such a call to action with the power to compel me to move cities. If my company calls me back to the office, I'd quit before leaving Tulsa. And I think this is so representative of the workforce today. It's so representative of the talent today. We're prioritizing place over work. We have choice. We have options. We have access to resources. We have perspective coming out of a pandemic about what matters most to us in life. What would happen if collectively, together, in this room and across the country, we used that to focus on the future of life as opposed to the future of work? I appreciate you all having me today.